So today I'm going to talk about the incentivized L2. So I want to set the expectation of this particular presentation here. So I'm not going to sell Metis, okay? So I don't think I need to sell it. I'm not going to sell any products, but really I want to tell everyone the journey of Metis, how Metis is using Metis token as an incentivized tool to increase the adoption of L2, and the technical challenges we have faced, the solution we implemented, and the ongoing challenges we're having right now as an infrastructure DAO and a community-driven community-driven infrastructure, and going forward. Hopefully this talk will give some ideas, some experience, and some lessons we learned. So when you start out a new infrastructure DAO, you won't repeat the same mistake, or you can even innovate further based on what we learned. So first, how Metis was established. So when Metis was first founded, we didn't start out with a layer 2. So layer 2 was actually not the first mission we had. The first mission we had is to promote this online and on-chain collaboration. So we found a lot of DAOs previous years were focusing so much on voting, so much on treasury management, but not so much on the business activities. There are a lot of things that business has to do, daily operations, including internal transactions, transactions across DAOs, across different entities, basically, financial and non-financial, project delivery, all those things. Those are not really captured in the older DAO framework. Well, that's an iterative development, right? So I understand that. So when we were looking at the DAO ecosystem, say, hey, there's a space we can get in. We can introduce more framework to promote on-chain business activities so that actual economic activity can happen on-chain more and replace the off-chain entities and all legal entities that we had to deal with the government and centralized power. Now the problem quickly arises when we start to implementing that framework is that we don't have a strong enough infrastructure to support inexpensive and fast operations that businesses rely on every day in order to make their business model viable. And that's why Metis started out with a DAO vision, but we also start to focus on a layer 2 solution. So one biggest question we faced back then is, hey, how are we going to increase and promote the adoption of a layer 2 solution? Because there are so many layer 2 there. The first question we had, investors asked us and the community asked us, hey, this space is saturated. How are you going to compete with us? Well, incentivization is a very powerful tool. So when Metis token was invented, we had a very, very, very thorough discussion whether we're going to use Metis as a gas payment token on Metis network. So that was actually a hard debate. You can hear opinions from different sides. For example, right now, Optimum and Arbitron, they use Ether to pay the gas fees. And on Metis, we use Metis. The reason why we decide to use Metis is actually you can actually find evidence nowadays with adoption and fast adoption of Andromeda, is that when people get into this ecosystem by purchasing Metis tokens, they're more incentivized to use your network. Because the more transactions they use, the more successful the ecosystem projects they become, the whole value of Metis token also increase alongside. So they're actually incentivized to participate in ecosystem projects, to participate in building the layer 2 together. So that's the first thing we noticed when we start an infrastructure level DAO, which requires a very complex protocol and requires some very good adoption in order to be successful. A incentivized token mechanism is actually a must-have. So that's the first lesson we learned. The second that we found that actually is very complicated to use Metis token as a gas payment token. Let me tell you what the complication is. For a layer 2, there are a lot of factors or components in this payment. First, you need to incur some gas cost because it's a rollup, so you have to roll the data up to layer 1. Layer 1 is not cheap. So you have to incur actual gas costs in Ether to make your layer 2 work. That, again, that's not Metis token. So we somehow have to have a way so that periodically we collect the Metis token and we swap the Metis to Ether, and then we can replenish the DAO treasury that way. Then how much do we charge for our transactions? That's the second challenge we faced, because Metis token price changes every day. You can look at the price chart of Metis. It's actually going quite crazy, up and down, up and down. Now, how are you going to react to the ever-changing price of Metis token in relation to Ether? That's the first changing component. The second changing component is the L1 gas fee changes every day dramatically, just like a Metis chart. So it's just every day in the morning it can be very low, and in the afternoon it can be very high, even to 200 green. So how do we react to this ever-changing L1 gas cost we have to incur as an infrastructure in order to make L2 work? So in the end, we found a rigid mathematical formula may not cut the deal. So what we end up with is a more treasury-based formula. So what we're trying to do is we average out a weekly treasury spending, and then look at the treasury income. And we look at the online on-chain activities and see how many transactions are going, and predict if there's any big launches going on in the next week. With that prediction, we try to find and predict a gas price that is suitable for a reasonable profit margin for the DAO. Again, DAO still needs some profit margin in the gas collection so that they can continue to develop, continue to innovate. But this is I would say this is actually a very cutting-edge prediction algorithm that we implement. And hopefully it can be done more decentralized way in the future, and that's what we're hoping to achieve going forward when we fully decentralize the infrastructure DAO for Metis. That's the second thing I want to highlight. So if anyone wants to start a new layer 2 with a token, happy to talk about it. There are many headaches you have to go through in order to make it work, but it will definitely work. So the third thing we noticed, because as a DAO, you definitely need some consensus within the community, because your community needs to participate how the direction of innovation going, what things our team needs to focus on in order to improve the infrastructure. In our case, it's Metis Andromeda layer 2 solution. So there needs to be some voting or consensus mechanism. Very easily, I would say the first approach that everyone will take is, hey, let's just use Metis token as a voting token. Actually, the team is actually doing snapshots votings recently. We recently introduced a community ecosystem program, so the community start to doing the ecosystem project vetting instead of the Metis team doing it. So that uses Metis as a snapshot voting token. But the problem arises. I think everyone is quite familiar with the challenges and problems with voting tokens, especially in Metis' case. It is actually a utility token in a way, because you use that to pay the gas. But if you use that also to do the voting, then it's a dilemma. Hey, what should I use? Like, is it going to be used for voting? Is it going to be used for paying the gas? So a very common strategy, and the kind of strategy that we're going to use in Metis is to use the staking mechanism, where you can stake the Metis, and then you get the voting token from the staking emission. So that is a way that we can ensure a long-term community members and well-invested community members have more voting powers for those infrastructure proposals. So the very important thing I do want to highlight is for infrastructure DAO, and the decision can make huge impact. For example, right now TVL for Metis Andromeda is around $400 million. I think the highest point that we ever reached was close to $1 billion US dollars. So that was a lot of money on the line. So if the first question I was asked, hey, is it safe to actually give the infrastructure level decision to a DAO, to a community? It is very debatable. It is definitely a vector of the attack. So anyone can somehow get a very high voting power and change how the infrastructure works, or even deploy a new smart contract which is has some loopholes where it can be take advantage by the hackers. Actually, there was a recent hack Beanstalker, I think, is the project was hacked in that way. So they deploy a smart contract using the DAO infrastructure, and there was a loophole in a smart contract so that they actually lose quite a lot, actually 100 million, more than 100 million US dollars. So it is actually very dangerous to directly give the community the control on the infrastructure. But there's a very interesting characteristic of a optimistic rollup. That's what Metis is. There's a 7-day finality window. So once a consensus has been reached by a voting from the DAO, if the infrastructure DAO needs to change anything that impacts the infrastructure as a whole, they need to actually finalize it on layer 1. That finalization window is right now set to 7 days. So this delay actually helps the community to censor itself, in a way, to basically correct if there's anything wrong with any questionable behavior. During those 7 days, there's actually a mechanism that you can freeze a particular proposal. So it's actually a very, very interesting characteristic of optimistic rollup. You can actually freeze one particular state. So this state cannot be relayed to L1, meaning that that proposal that you want to, so the proposal about changing the infrastructure actually cannot be relayed to L1 if the DAO decide to freeze that particular proposal. So the mechanism is actually there to kind of safeguard the infrastructure DAO so that the community or a dishonest member of that community cannot harm the infrastructure as a whole that easily. But still, that's a vector of attack that is a hot topic, and we continue research. So for anyone that would like to run a very big protocol with a lot of TVLs in that, and if you gave the decision to a DAO, you have to deal with the situation. So this is a very important thing that I do want to highlight, and something that we learned when working on Metis. So yeah, so this is actually the main topic I want to talk about. I do want to leave the last 5 minutes for any questions you may have.
Here. There.
I'm just curious to learn more about, given the security risk that you have highlighted just now, has it always been the decision to make it a DAO to govern the infrastructure, or was that like what actually motivated you to take that risk despite that's obvious concerns?
Yeah. Just like I said, the history of Metis is we started out with a decentralized collaboration. So the Metis is also run in this way. So we want to make sure that we are not the only one that controls the infrastructure. Actually, so I talked to many people. I said, honestly, I do not want to be the one operating our layer 2 node at all. I do not want that. That should be in the community. That should be decentralized. I do not want to have that superpower to control billions of TVL. That's not what I want. That's the overall vision that we have. But again, there are definitely a lot of things that we have to be very careful when giving the community. Again, it's a trustless community. There can be some bad players in the community. I hope there are not, but there can be. And for us to prepare our tech stack, our processes, and the whole voting infrastructure for those unfortunate events is what we're trying to focus on.
Any other question?
Great. Thank you very much.